today we're going to cover a pop-up solution that actually works. Recently I've had two clients who have had a similar issue and I've been working with them personally with this, with my pop-up rehab programs. And it's all to do with the positioning of the feet and how they're actually swinging through, which a lot of people get incorrect, and it puts them into these really awkward positions that get them stuck, that get them stiff, and it's really hard to come out of. But there's quick alterations that we can make that actually give us more leverage and more strength to pop up more smoothly, quicker, and just make it a ton easier out in the water. This is something we can practice on land today to really hone in our skills and make it even easier to translate it into the water. So let's get into that now. And if you are new here, my name's Considine, and I'm a professional longboarder, a surf coach, and a physiotherapist. I've got a program called Pop-Up Rehab, as I mentioned, which is where I work one-on-one with people to restore the functionality of the pop-up and treat the pop-up like the high-performance task that it is, where we actually train the performance, rehab elements in order to get it happening explosively and making sure that we've got it for a long time to come. If that's interesting, I'll leave a link down below of how you can work with me, but let's get straight into the edit. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna break this down exactly, showing you what happens and what makes the pop-up so difficult and what we can do at home, and then again translating into the water to fix this. But essentially the biggest problem that we usually see, and this might be something that you find is quite relatable and something you see or feel out in the water, but is where we get kind of stuck in this position. And I think I popped this in the thumbnail of the video as well, where we're stuck here and it's really difficult to come out of. And this is usually a position where if people do come up, then as soon as we stand up, we do have to make a lot of corrections. And so instead of it being a pop-up where we might come quickly to our feet, or a nice steady two-stage pop-up where we're then ready to go, what often happens is we come up and we get our feet in an awkward position, we stand up, already from this position, we're kind of struggling, and then we've kind of got to make some of the corrections there. It is important to know about what is wrong with that position. So first off, what we're doing in this position here is we're actually relying on this front foot to push off in order to stand up, okay? And I like to make sure that as surfers, we're actually comfortable projecting upwards off of the back foot. And if the back foot positioning isn't quite right, then what will happen is we're not able to stand up there. We have to throw ourselves forwards, which means that the front foot position is likely off, and then it's going to be a stand up from there, which again is going to be really, really tricky. Now, the other things often going wrong here is if I put this along this way, you'll be able to see that instead of having the feet landing in a nice position across the imaginary stringer that we would have here, what's actually happening is we get both feet kind of one side and the other of the stringer, okay? And so it means as we stand up from this position, it gets really tricky. Now, all of this comes to say that if we're needing to pop up quickly and react quickly on a good wave, because maybe it's steep and maybe we've got to do a turn, then none of this is going to work, and getting to our feet and making sure the feet are in the right position from the get-go is going to be super, super important. So the last thing that I'll mention there from this perspective of things to watch out for is where we've got the chest low and the bottom high, okay? And this is another big one because it's a function of having to, again, project our weight forwards and relying on that front foot to bring us back up, which again is a no-go for the moment. So what we end up is this chest stays low, we're looking down, and you can see the bottom will be pretty high here. Again, a really weak position for us to come up from. So the first thing that we're going to focus on, and I'll try and be a natural footer, so I'm facing you for this today, even though I'm a goofy footer, is exactly how to bring this good pop-up about, all right? And there's a couple of quick fixes. It's firstly important to note that with this pop-up, we are going to be using a two-stage pop-up. So it might look something like this, so 1, 2, okay? This can actually transfer into a really quick pop-up as we kind of bridge the gap between that back foot and front foot landing. But what we want to do here is the first thing is we want the back foot to come through quite a long way. So what I often see again is if our back foot doesn't land far enough forwards, then we have no leverage or strength with the foot underneath our center of mass to push upwards. And that is why we're going to be falling forwards in this position, which again is going to be a really, really tricky thing to recover from. So the first thing we're going to try and do is see how we can go about getting that front foot further through. So if we get that front foot kind of underneath our hips, we're going to be at a big advantage, okay? Because now we can kind of use that to press our whole body up and create a whole bunch of fantastic space underneath us there, which is really, really good. So at the moment, if you're doing this with me here, just trial that. See how we go, getting that back foot not as far through and how hard it is to get everything through versus getting the back foot further through and how much easier it is to push up. So the second thing that we need to make sure that we're focusing on, and this is a huge one, is the angle of that back foot. What you'll see a lot of surfers doing, I'll make sure this is in line with you, again, is even if their back foot comes far enough through, it's actually landing in that forward position. I like to say this is kind of like our ready, set, go position, like we're gonna race in a running race. But what we wanna do instead is, we're not runners, we're surfers. We want to try and land with our foot in the surfing position, which means at that angle across the board, okay? Now this, from a physio perspective and a strengthening perspective, I find interesting. Might not be interesting for you guys, but it's important to know because we're much stronger with our heel in contact with the floor in order to push up. Again, you wouldn't ask someone to do a heavy squat with their heels elevated and lifted up. We want to have the heels so we can drive through that posterior chain, through the glutes, hammies. So what we need to do for ourselves is we want to try and make sure that not only do we bring that back foot further through, but we angle that. And now if you watch here, I've got this whole point of contact from heel, midfoot to the ball of the foot and toes to actually use that whole leg to project myself forwards, which is going to be a massive, massive advantage. Now with this, there's probably a few things that you're wondering in terms of, I can't get my back foot in that position because my hips feel a bit tight, my ankle feels a bit tight, or maybe you don't have the strength to bring it through all that way. Again, this is the stuff that I do focus on with people a lot with my pop-up rehab programs. It is a big process to be able to get the feet underneath us and to have the explosiveness, which we'll go through in a second, and also just the range of motion and the strength capacity to be able to do all that. But the next stage of this is where we bring this into, instead of a two-stage process, into a one-stage process. So instead of it being 1, 2, okay, we want to try and make that a bit quicker. And the real cue that I'll give you here is just trying to make sure you're jumping through to land that back foot on the ground. Now I have a specific process of how to do this, but maybe making it a bit too long. But if you can try and think about landing with that back foot first and making the transition between back foot and front foot landing quicker, it can be a massive advantage. And that's how we're going to see the progression in our pop-up. But again, creating space. And big thing is relying on that back foot in order to project ourselves up. And then the last thing that this will correct again, that we mentioned at the start, is instead of getting up, and when we do get up, having to correct ourselves and kind of doing 4 steps there. So 1, 2, 3, 4. We're going to be able to do that in 2 steps and be able to go much more quickly. So I hope that's helpful. If you have any questions with that, please let me know. And again, I'd love to help you out if you are having a bit of trouble with the pop-up. It is a high demand performance task. Everything from our strength, power, mobility, flexibility, and a lot of our stability is all going to come into play with being able to pop up effectively. And we do need to train that correctly. So yeah, if you want any help with that, then let me know. I'll actually pop another video up here, which is gonna help you with some of the strengthening exercises that I like to see people doing to restore their pop-up. So feel free to click on that wherever it appears on the screen here. And if you have any other ideas or things that you'd like to see from the channel from me, then I'd love to hear that below as well. But otherwise, we'll catch you on the next one.